everyone. I'm Barbara Castellana Stasiak, your service associate this morning. Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, wherever you are, in this room or watching from home, wherever you are on life's journey, we welcome you here.
Good morning. I am Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So glad to welcome those of us who are here in person and those who are attending with the live stream. Three announcements this morning. This is the last Sunday that you can buy the cheaper version of the auction tickets. So they're $15 instead of $20 if you buy it today. And Barbara was telling me that folks who are offering food as part of the services auction are going to have samples of the food there at 6 o'clock next Saturday. So it sounds like it's going to be a really great time. If you are able to, there's wine and beer available.
There's what?
Wine and beer,
Yes.
Also part of the event. Yeah. So I encourage you to look online and can you still make a submission for the services auction?
No, we're not accepting any more offerings, but there are loads of them available. And at next Saturday at 6, you
Next
can
Saturday at 6.
select the ones you want.
Yes, very cool. Then we have an Odyssey next Sunday after the service. And I encourage you to look at that in the order of service. It describes that, 12:45. And this afternoon at 2, trunk or treat. Do I have that right? Yeah, right? So I'm going to go right into the opening words because I have to tell you that one of the things that I love about Halloween are costumes and masks. And I saw that there's some folks who are wearing like cat ears and some costumes, that sort of thing. Somebody suggested to me, if you have a collar, Joel, you could wear that for Halloween. Except that it wouldn't be a costume for me. I do actually have one. I remember my children are now grown, but when my daughter was very little, she was just old enough to have her own costume, and we had her in a costume as a ladybug, and she even had some red paint on her face, and she was just figuring out the part of Halloween where she went from door to door to all of the neighbors' houses and would ring the doorbell, and we would say trick or treat. She loved that. And so I was at home and handing out candy, and she was going with her mom around the neighborhood. And when she got back, she'd clearly been enjoying some of the candy already because her red was brown with chocolate, and she was on this high, sugar buzz high, and her eyes were kind of like wide. And she saw me and she said, Dad, I'm a ladybug. Give me chocolate. Her desire for the chocolate was not masked in the least bit. I'm talking about masks today in the service, masks beyond masks, and so glad that we are here to worship together, perhaps in ways that we don't have to mask our true selves, but can be truly and genuinely with one another in community. We light our chalices now this morning, and I invite you to rise in spirit or in body as we light our chalices. And this is our affirmation that we say together as we light our chalice. It's on the screen. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
So, how many of you know how to snap? And if you can't, can you click? Oh, yeah, you can click. So when I snap, you either snap or click. And the next song, I think everybody older than a certain age will get the melody, and if they're younger than a certain age, they'll catch on real quick. Okay? So, there we go.
I left my microphone. No, I left my microphone up there. All right, guys, I love that song. We are going to go to class today. It's our first day of our second unit of RE. We are, as some of you may know, changing things up a little bit. Instead of doing one long RE program throughout the year, we do 5 6-week programs that are focused on themes. This unit is focused on social justice. Last one was on environmental justice. We'll do more as we go forward. So you guys are all inside. This is the first time we are inside for all of our classes since really before the pandemic. So you guys know where you're going, hopefully. If you don't, we'll all go upstairs and figure it out. Here's the deal. Children, teachers, we're all going to go straight upstairs and then figure out where we're going to go. We're not going to have chaos in the Great Hall and distract all these fine adults while they continue their service, okay? Got it? All right, who wants to grab the chalice for me? All right, come on up. All right, grab our children's chalice and lead us on out of here. All right. There we go. Play us out there. All right, let's go. All the way upstairs.
Otherwise known as not singing our children to class.
A congregation gathers in mutual care, mutual support, and friendship, in service to the larger world. And part of the service is to recognize, both in spirit, the experience of these ways of connecting and mutual support. But there are times that we acknowledge some of the experiences and care that we have shared. For our larger community this morning, a milestone that we are noting together is the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband in San Francisco by a right-wing extremist. Difficult times, our commitment to our country, to our democracy. May it burn bright like this candle. A candle of care and concern for our neighbors in Korea. A stampede during a party there resulted in 150 people dying. Tom McGinnis is doing better and has a new address. It's in the online order of service. I see that I've run out of candles. Candle for for John Minahan. John Minahan was a member here and died this past Tuesday, and the memorial was yesterday morning. A candle in spirit for Steve Rice's older brother, who passed away earlier this month. Family is having a celebration of life ceremony next weekend in Pennsylvania. And a candle in spirit for Sharon Glickman and for Ann Gaynor. Ann was here yesterday, and the congregation celebrated with her and with Sharon's family. Celebration of life. Sharon was a member here for many years. And anytime we light our chalice, we are lighting candles, a flame like these candles, representing all of the passages that we share together, many of them here today, held silently in our hearts. I invite you into the spirit of meditation. In the womb of this world, where darkness and warmth are a canvas for creativity, we bring our very lives to face our possibilities. Our food and earth have become our bodies, and our bodies the frame for memories. Memories framed around our lives. And as we remember, our joys bring a smile, our sorrows, sighs, or tears. All this flows across our human landscape, the same way that rivers flow across the earth. Every moment that we live, we prepare ourselves for life. Ears, eyes, hands, tongues, noses, touching, tasting, hearing, feeling, seeing. And even if we lack one of these or any of these, always building an imagination, this world around us and ourselves within it, building an imagination, a world of love, painting an inner canvas of compassion. Let us bring into our bodies what is just and fair. Let us turn a face of love to the world. And in these moments now of silence, let all of this flower into an advent of peace and joy in our minds. May this worship together, may the compassion and joy in our minds bring together a world of peace. Amen. So be it. Blessed be. Let's sing together. This is number 83, Winds Be Still. It'll be on the screen here. It's also in our gray hymn books. I invite you to stand in spirit or in body. Paul Lawrence Dunbar was a African-American poet. He was born free, but his parents had been enslaved when slavery was still legal in the United States, in some states. He went to high school in Dayton, Ohio. He was the only black person in the building. He graduated, went to community college, was the only black person in the college, and he began writing poetry. And his poetry was published and respected widely, and yet poets don't make that much money, and so he still had to work, and he had to work as an elevator operator in the department store in downtown Dayton, Ohio. He would sell his books of poetry as he operated the elevator. And apparently he was supported in that, because I can't imagine, I'm old enough to remember elevator operators who were in Columbus, Ohio, even in the 1960s, always black. I can't imagine they would have been permitted to have sold their poetry. It wasn't easy to be a a poet, never mind being a black poet in the United States in the early 1900s especially. And I can remember even as a child, when I would be in those elevators, or when the shoemaker who rented a storefront from my father would come in to leave the rent check. His deference to me, a child, made me uncomfortable. I didn't understand that the elevator operators, that this shoemaker, they were doing as had been told to do, as they were expected to do, and that not to do it would have endangered their lives. I didn't quite understand what was going on until I first read this poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, this poet, African-American poet from Dayton, Ohio. The title of this poem is "We Wear the Mask." And please understand this poem is now over 100 years old. So for those of us who remember the mask that our African-American neighbors used to have to wear, the mask was part of everyday life in this country 100 years ago. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile. But oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask.
Our offering today will be shared 50-50 with Norwest Cap, an agency in northwestern New Jersey that empowers people to move away from the crisis of poverty and towards a future where they can thrive. So please be generous as our ushers pass the baskets, or you can donate via text or give online at muff.org/give. And we'll listen as Beth plays the graveyard theme.
I was reminded last night that there was still a possibility that I might have trickers-treaters tonight, so I had to buy some candy at the last minute. And I'm actually kind of hoping that I'll get some trick-or-treaters that knock at the door. You know, I live in a garden apartment, and there's a couple of doors. There's an outer door, there's an inner door. There's an apartment upstairs where my neighbor lives. If I don't get any trick-or-treaters, I got a lot of candy I got to do something with.
Bring it next week. Coffee hour.
Coffee hour. There we go. All right. Yeah. I hope you like Reese's peanut butter cups. All right. Good. I've in the last place I lived, there wasn't trick or treating, but I've lived in homes where I've had lots of trick or treaters. I always loved the traditional I think of it as the traditional trick or treating. You know, about 6:30, 6 o'clock, the parents come with the really little children, like my daughter was, that little ladybug. They'll be dressed in those cute ways. Sometimes the parents are actually carrying their child, and the child's looking at me like, "What are you giving me? What?" And then there are the kids that come about 9 or 9:30, the teenagers, and you can tell they're from several miles away, and they're working every street they can until the people won't open the doors. And at first I used to get irritated by that, but then I remembered, I was one of those. So there's customs, of going from house to house in masks and costumes. They came here with Scottish and Irish immigrants in the 1800s. These are customs that had survived in very distant parts of Ireland and Scotland, and actually didn't survive there, even as they made their way here to the United States. There are ancient records that describe these same customs of masks, candles, and vegetables, begging for treats, as part of an ancient Celtic holiday called Samhain. Samhain's still a word in use in Irish Gaelic, and it names this time of year. Samhain was the New Year celebration for the ancient Celts, the New Year being the time when the boundary between this world and the afterlife grew very thin. People wore frightening masks, they lit lanterns. The masks were to confuse the spirit of those ancestors who hadn't quite realized it was time to cross over and were still staying in this world. And sometimes the masks were frightening because it was like, can you just move on? And sometimes the masks were just to confuse the ancestors. The lanterns were a guide toward the places where the boundary between this world and the next were thinnest. Until 2 years ago, talking about masks and the masking we continued to do in this country and then re-imported as a custom back into Europe and actually into places like Korea. When we talked about masks, if I entered masks, for example, in Google, or I did an online search, you'd come back with Halloween masks. I put masks in a couple weeks ago to see what would happen, and it was the first 100 hits were all about N95s. Masking has a whole new meaning. Some of us wear the masks to reduce our chances of COVID infections. Some of us wear the masks as a way of protecting others around us. And it was striking to me how even in the worst months of the pandemic, only half of all Americans wore a mask when they went out. When the pandemic first arrived, I was in Louisiana, and less than half the people wore masks when they went out there. Epidemiologists estimated that if 95% of Americans had worn masks a year and a half ago, we would have saved 500,000 lives. But being unmasked was this political statement. And somehow then being masked had to be a political statement. It was a symbol of freedom to be unmasked. And yet there was no actual freedom in it other than there's the freedom of not having to have those straps, and my nose breaks out a lot these days. I'd like to be free of that. But when being unmasked as a political statement becomes, for some badly defined freedom becomes more important than 500,000 lives? What have we unmasked in that, I wonder? In some ways, what we unmasked has always been there, which is, I think, what Halloween is, in part, reminding us about. We play with it, though. We're playful with it. A holiday with symbols of death, skeletons, masks, children very high on sugar. Children are learning the ancient power of masks and what lies behind masks. A child knows at a wordless level that she is frail and vulnerable in a chaotic world, and she puts on a Wonder Woman costume, and for a day she can take control of the world and defend those who are vulnerable. Another child knows difficult journeys are ahead and puts on the courage of Harry Potter. A straight, cisgendered high school boy, almost a man, lives in this world of impossible expectations for him. On Halloween, he could dress as a girl or as a woman, and he can imagine having the emotional freedom that is allowed girls and women, but not typically allowed to men and boys. We're all wearing masks of some kind every day. I'm wearing a kind of costume right now. I dressed up in a suit and a tie this morning. I want to come here and, in this costume, show respect. And the deep feeling I have, at the joy, at the privilege of being in this conversation with you. The costumes, the things we wear, the masks we wear of courtesy, of being polite, they seem to become invisible because we grow used to them. But we're never fully unmasked, just as the lifestyles we wear are not everything that we are. And I remember this. I often remember this when I run into someone in an unexpected context. Typically, what I'm saying this unexpected context is for me is I'll be in my day off and I'm wearing a hoodie and some old jeans, and I'm not wearing my business casual weekday minister uniform. And suddenly I find myself looking at somebody and thinking, they look familiar, and they're looking at me and they'll say, "Oh, hi, Reverend Joel," and I'm like, oh, where am I? Scientists study how brains work, and when they study how we recognize, they can see the shifts in our neurons in our brains. The recognition shows up physically in the structure of our brains, but our facial expressions change too. Our body language changes. Brain scans reveal the different ways that the different contexts inhabit our brain. So congregational life lives in one part of my brain, and shopping on my day off lives in a different part, and they get a little confused sometimes when I'm doing both. A mask can be a metaphor, but it turns out that the metaphor of mask, whether it's our face, our costume, the way we present, something we're literally wearing, the metaphor itself isn't a fiction. It's still something real, even if intangible. So this poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, I was just floored the first time I read it. And I've come to realize that while that extreme deference isn't necessary for most Black Americans in, let me rephrase that. That deference isn't quite as necessary in many settings. It certainly isn't necessary in the grocery store anymore, certainly not here in New Jersey. It is, I know, when Black folks are dealing with like police officers, they got to get very deferential again. It doesn't make me happy that they have to do that. It's a matter of life and death, as it turns out. But that poem describes my country. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. Why should the world count all our tears and cries? Let them only see us while we wear the mask. It still happens, it's mostly in a more subtle way. As I'm looking around the room, at this point, I had some reservations, I have to admit, about reading the poem. I thought, who might hear it? If I were black, would I want to hear this poem at worship on Sunday morning? Maybe not. Knowing that I hadn't been seeing anybody who's black, I felt a little more comfortable bringing the poem. And I can tell you that the way that it still describes America, even though it came out of an older time, today we call it code switching. So if you haven't heard of code switching, I encourage you to go to National Public Radio, go online. You can download podcasts from a program called Code Switch. It's a great way to understand that continuing experience that black folks in America still experience. Many black folks live in communities that are distinctly and beautifully black, and there's this amazing, wonderful culture. And the code switching is what black folks still do to survive, especially when they're having to deal with police officers. But if you ever have the privilege to be invited into a black home or into a black social event, and you find that as a white person or maybe as an Asian American person or a Latinx person, that you're not quite following what's going on, suddenly the language seems to have shifted, you'll find that, the rare moments I've had that experience, I've realized that the black folks I'm with are not code switching for me. They're just being black. And they're talking black, as black folks do. Heavy masks have come off in moments like that. So I've come to learn is if I'm a white guest in a black home and the folks are so comfortable that they don't code switch for me, that's a privileged moment and one to treasure. Other traditions in the world, religious traditions, other cultures, talk a lot about masks. Zen Buddhism has a spiritual practice of koans. A koan is a paradoxical question showing the inadequacy of logical reasoning, encourages enlightenment. And one of my favorite Zen koans is this question: show me your original face before you were born. That when I first heard that koan, I thought of my 3-year-old daughter's first Halloween and her innocent, joyful face smeared with chocolate and makeup. There's an originality in a young child's face, that her soul unmasked, the chemical buzz of sugar coursing through her veins, and the sort of buzz that was going on for her. But as I thought about it, more than just sort of the biochemistry that was going on for her in that moment, I could have maybe asked the question, what is your original identity? As children, I remember with my kids learning to share toys, learning the skills needed to play together with others. And I think one of the first things we do as kids is learn to act like we're glad to share that toy when we're really annoyed at having to share it, even if we aren't using the toy. Poker players learn to mask their reactions. Oh my gosh, a royal flush. Don't show it, don't show it. Black folks learn to wear that mask. Queer folks in red state America or in Africa or in Asia, they have to wear the masks of heterosexuality. Masks, though, can also be transformational. There are always parts of us that are unformed, that are raw, parts of us not ready to face the world yet until they grow strong enough, parts of us that haven't really engaged the world yet as we try to understand what is this that's happening and within me. The Zuni people of New Mexico say that masks have a power that is beautiful and dangerous. And many of the southwestern Indian cultures, Native American cultures have special holy days in which there will be dancers who wear masks. And there's even a ritual by which children, as they first encounter these holy days, just see the masked dancers come out. And they're not sure, are these spirits that have come out that are dancing? And then later on, there's a moment for older children when they see the dancers take the masks off and understand, yes, the masks have power, and yet somebody you know and love has been wearing that mask all these years. I put a collar on, usually for demonstrations, or as I mentioned a couple Sundays ago, I put it on when I responded to the shootings at the Columbine High School. And I don't mean it as a disguise. I mean it to signify what the role that I'm in, what I'm doing at that moment. And my hope is at that moment that when I'm wearing it, I'm a symbol of a community that wants to serve the larger world. Although I noticed one time I was headed to a demonstration and I was wearing a collar, and instead of driving, I wanted to take the bus. And I ended up having to take several confessions on the bus. So I am a little choosy about when I wear the collar and where I'm going with it. There's an etiquette, by the way. Should you be in the American Southwest and be invited, or into another culture, say in Africa, where there's some mask wearing going on, never pick up a mask and just put it on. At the very least, you would ask permission to do that. Probably best to leave it alone unless it's offered to you. I don't know, I actually never got to see the movie, but I remember the promotional materials for it. I think it was Jim Carrey, and it was a movie about a mask, and he put the mask on, and then it was a mask and he became, I think, the god Loki. Am I remembering that right? It kind of makes sense, actually, because in ancient cultures of Europe, if you put on the mask of a god or of a demon, you would take on the presence of that being. So the screenwriters didn't just make that up. They actually got that from ancient European culture. I thought back, though, about the ways that we mask and the way that the metaphor plays out in our lives. I did a wedding many years ago that revealed how we mask ourselves for occasions, how we're costumed for occasions, and what can be behind the ritual of our masking, if you will. So weddings have a lot of ritual and tradition attached to them. Even if one's doing a non-traditional wedding, there's still some ritual. There's still there's still the wearing of different kinds of clothing, presenting oneself differently. Back in the day, I do very, very few weddings anymore. I think it's been several years since I've even done one. You can go online, and anybody can go online and get a quick ordination certificate, I think, for $5, which is fine with me. The weddings I really love to do are the weddings for the people, and I'm of the congregation I'm serving. But I used to do many, many weddings, and one of the congregations I served especially. And they were fancy weddings. This particular wedding I'm remembering, very fancy. There were great flowers everywhere. There was a videographer. There was a photographer. There was a wedding coordinator even. The bride's dress was exquisite and had this really long train. So we had done a rehearsal that Friday night and then the Saturday of the wedding. And at the rehearsal, there was all these details to remember. So it was a 2-hour rehearsal, which is long. Usually an hour is enough time, and about half of that's people kind of figuring out how to catch their breath and relax and walk through the paces. But this was a 2-hour rehearsal. It had to have a kind of military precision to it. The specific order, how did everybody process into the sanctuary? Where did people sit? Where did they stand? I was very careful because of the length of the train on the bride's dress to rehearse how the train would be placed as the bride was standing at the altar, and her father then could take his seat. We just wanted to make sure no one stepped on it and that it looked good for the pictures. So the day of the wedding, everything was running like clockwork. And the moment arrived, and the bride had come down the nave, the center aisle of the sanctuary to the altar, and Dad stepped on the train. Actually, I failed to mention one thing. This was not only a dress with a long train, it was also a strapless dress. Oh yeah, and that's exactly what happened. He stepped on the train, and the dress just got pulled completely down. So much was revealed in that moment. The bridesmaids immediately surrounded the bride and got her fixed up. Everybody was at first in shock, and then the dad was inconsolable. It broke apart, and he was crying. And his daughter had gotten herself pulled back together, and she gave him a big hug and said very loudly, "Daddy, it's okay. It's all on videotape. We're going to laugh at this for the rest of our lives." And I want to tell you, I was so happy for that moment for them, because after all of that formality, all of this structure, sort of the mask, so almost masking reality, and then what was revealed was what's so important about why have a wedding? Because of the love, the support of the people who love you. The wedding was not the dress, not the flowers. It wasn't going to be the elegant reception. What was behind the mask of all that formality was a family whose love was unmistakable. And there were two people who just loved each other, surrounded by people who loved them and supported them. It's in moments like this that I think we understand what masks are for. We can try on a new mask among the safety of friends. We can create sacred moments when the masks can safely come off and something about us is revealed. And I've come to think that we Unitarian Universalists don't just allow each other to believe in whatever. I actually don't think we've ever really meant to do that. What we're doing is recreating ourselves with each other. We bring these experiences, these well-worn identities, these new identities, and as we live them, wear them, we do so among friends who mean to support us and care for us, allow us to be transformed into beings more fully formed, more powerfully loving. Here we can unmask what we hold most dear, reveal to one another with trembling hearts what we're not sure about. Perhaps even those things we wish were not a part of us. It's our good service to hold gently the revelations we give one another from our deepest hearts, and from the truths we find together, create a greater common good. This is our spiritual path, and I think an example of one the world needs. By sharing the good we have within us, we can nurture it in each other and bring to the world that greater good that allows us all to survive. I'd like to invite you all to sing together. This is, I first heard this song when the Spirit says do. There was a musician named Raffi. Yeah, I played Raffi a lot for my children. A song called Wheels on the Bus, for example, and other songs. And when the Spirit says do. And so when it showed up a couple of years later in our UU congregations, I really enjoyed that. Thank you for standing in body or in spirit. Loved singing with you guys. May the boundaries between this world and the next appear only when it's time, but may the boundaries between love, the world of love and the world of kindness, always be thin, always be ready for us. Go in peace, be in peace. Know that the light of love, hope, and connection burns here. Go in peace, be in peace. We'll be together again.
Some parts of the